reading of Treasures of Darkness, and where we finished off is we were about to meet some new characters entering the watch house. So far it had just been the two of us. And I finished off with, it was Friday and a new member was introduced to our pod. Bernice was a large, foul-mouthed young woman with long, thick hair, very pale skin and rotten teeth. She sailed in, announced she was having withdrawals from heroin, went straight to the other cell and lay down to sleep. My first close contact with what was obviously a hardened criminal. Amanda and I looked at each other and wondered what we were in for when she awoke. The reading I had done regarding withdrawals painted a frightening picture of screaming pain, vomiting and diarrhea and flinging oneself about for several days. That's all I knew. Our next guest arrived and we pointed to the cell where Bernice was sleeping. She looked frightened and asked us anxiously, "Will she attack me?" Not having a clue, we answered, "No, you'll be safe. She's okay." I don't know what else we were going to say. We did our best to reassure her, but we were not the ones sharing a cell with Bernice. Frances was a young woman with big curls, dark hair, a baby face and sad eyes. She'd worked in the payroll office of a supermarket. She was also a gambling addict. Her job provided her with the opportunity to misdirect funds she could then use to gamble with. She's still amazed at how easy it was to create fictional employees. Frances came from a blended yet respectable home. She didn't drink much or do drugs. However, she had begun buying scratch-it cards as a lonely young teenager, quickly becoming addicted. She was to serve 14 months. In the afternoon, an uproar of catcalls arose from down the corridor. As we craned our necks, we watched in awe as a young, wild-haired Indigenous woman strode towards us. With a blanket and towel in one hand, the other hand flipped the bird to the male prisoners as she swept past them. And she swept past them. Sophie entered our pod like it was her lounge room, dumping her gear, flopping down with a big grin and a string of profanity. We liked her instantly. There was something reassuring about her confidence. I was fascinated. She had got caught with drugs at South Bank, a popular city play area where families gathered, and security is greater. Cops can generally tell when someone is suspect, and she and her boyfriend just looked, well, suspicious. Giving cheek is a quick way to get more attention from the police too, even if you're not doing anything wrong. Sophie was familiar with a variety of watch houses. She claimed to have miscarried in one due to a police beating. I didn't know if she was telling the truth, but from what I've heard and observed since, it wouldn't surprise me. There are many stories from Indigenous women about police brutality, but they are difficult to prove. I remembered the Aboriginal deaths in custody inquiry being big news in the late 1980s and early 90s. Aborigines were committing suicide in alarming rates whilst in custody. It was even higher in remote areas. I thought then of the questions raised by the media about whether they had indeed been suicides. I hadn't really believed the accusations back then. After all, the police are there to serve and protect. However, now I can see how easily a line gets crossed. Criminals lack credibility and can be severely punished for making an accusation that cannot be proven. Why would they be believed? It's quite timely to be reading this after what's happened in America recently. It's got me thinking a lot about it again. Some of the officers we encountered were polite and matter-of-fact. Others were profane, verbally abusive and rude. As far as some were concerned, we were the dregs of society. I wondered at the irony that filthy language in public is against the law, yet it's used with impunity by some officers. I've got a reference here, Queensland Summary Offences Act 2005, Section 6. Police and correction officers have difficult, often unpleasant jobs. I'm sure most of them are well-intentioned, good people. However, excuse me, personalities and strength of character vary under pressure. So it's little wonder some of them become tainted by their environment. They're still responsible, but I can see how they get tainted. People like me are not normally bothered by the police. As a well-mannered, well-dressed white woman, I have respectable written all over me. I know it. By comparison with many women, I have nothing to complain about. In prison, I made a point of being polite to everyone, especially officers, regardless of how they spoke to me. I carefully worded my requests so they would respond favourably. In fact, it's part of when I do customer service training, I talk about how sometimes when you're the customer, I will go into a shop and use my customer service skills to get good service from an indifferent or poorly trained employee. It's managing people and trying to get the best out of them. Okay, and here's the thing: I didn't feel like a criminal, and I didn't see myself as a criminal. So I didn't talk to them like I was one, and I didn't talk to them like I was inferior or subordinate, which didn't always endear me to some staff. But those stories will come later. Some people just need you to act like you should be just so grateful that they even throw you a scrap. The next morning, Bernice awoke crying out in pain. So she's the one who came in and said she was a heroin addict. She was very sick. She had run out of usable veins. So she'd given herself an extra dose into her upper arm muscles. Apparently it would be less powerful but last longer. Later someone else told me that theory was rubbish. I don't know. We let Bernice have the first shower of the day. She didn't bother closing the heavy door. She had trouble lifting her badly swollen arms, so I helped her remove her top, and it was sticky from dried pus. And I winced when she exploded with a string of invectives from the pain. She was like a big wounded animal. She had these wounds on both sides that I'll be describing in a minute. So I was very careful because I didn't know how she would respond or if she'd lash out. But Bernice had been here before. As we waited for our turn, we heard the water stop, then start again. We looked at each other, realising we could have showered longer just by pressing the button again. Bernice wordlessly took 3 showers, and we were not going to complain. Eventually, she emerged, moaning in pain. She tried to dry off, but she needed help. And I noticed a hole in each of her upper arms, and they would be 1 centimetre or about half an inch, both in diameter and in depth, like right in there. And the skin around the holes was red and tight and swollen. And I looked inside, because there was this hole here, and I looked inside and I could actually see the muscle underneath. Well, I presume it was the muscle. I'd never seen a wound like it. Both holes were dribbling a thick yellow substance. It was watery in parts and it oozed like poisonous toothpaste from the expanded punctures. And it descended each arm rapidly and it stained her shirt sleeves. She told me it was heroin. I don't know, but I sprang for the cheap and nasty toilet paper, the kind you find frustrating in public toilets. I must have gone through half a box wiping gently up her arms, just wiping to clean it up. And the other girls whispered in horror, "Don't touch her, you don't know what she's got." I knew they were referring to HIV, I don't know a lot about it, but I ignored them and continued wiping the tender arms, quietly ministering to Bernice and silently praying for her. She had a need and I could help. I firmly believed that regardless of what she had, God would not let me catch anything if I was serving Him by serving her. I don't know whether that's true, but that's what I believed. Because I know some people who've helped leper colonies and things had ended up getting sick, but it's just what I felt I needed to do. So my actions were naive, perhaps even noble, but still it gave me a charge as I felt the power of the Holy Spirit's anointing moving from me to Bernice, and she felt it too. And looking into my eyes, she asked, "What the was that?" And a peculiar friendship was born. I didn't have any cuts on my hands, and I was sensible enough to wash thoroughly with soap afterwards. And fortunately, Bernice was taken to see a nurse who put band-aids on her holes. Our time at the watch house was mind-numbingly boring. As a highlight was when we randomly moved to other pods. It happened several times, and then we would scrub all over again. An officer told us it wasn't our job. He said he'd get us a broom, but we didn't see any. We asked if a cleaner came in, and we're told, oh yes, every couple of days. And we never saw one of those either, so we think he was being sarcastic. Another highlight was being allowed to spend an hour in the yard each day. This was a brick pit, a small outdoor area made of high brick walls and the sky. It had a putrid toilet at the rear with a bubbler in the top that we were not going to risk drinking from. There was nothing to do but walk up and down. I thought of the many times I had walked into the city from Roma Street Station, totally unaware of the misery just a few metres below me. Making the most of the novelty of fresh air and sky, I pulled off my tracksuit top and tied it into a ball and tossed it to Amanda. Catch! She laughed and we all began to toss it around, pretending to score goals. This game was popular each time we went out. Then one day the voice of a rather unpleasant officer yelled at us, telling us not to play with the piece of uniform or we'd be put inside again. We amused ourselves by doing handstands against the walls for a while. It may sound silly, but there was nothing to do but stand around. I thought it was important to create a positive atmosphere for us. I'm not sure where I was mentally, but I felt spiritually responsible for these women, and that meant making the best of things. Trish the rescuer all the time. Another game I suggested was the silly walk game. This game had one main rule. Each person had to move across the yard in a different way. I'm sure the officers wondered what they were dealing with as we skipped, waddled and danced back and forth. I had these girls laughing, which was so much better than crying. Well, that was a pleasant hour, I commented one day as we made our way inside, as though we had been ladies strolling in a garden. Bernice cackled. Pleasant, eh? Oh, this was so pleasant. You call this just blub, 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 hole rather unpleasant today? Who talks like that? You're so funny. I'm going to call you pleasant from now on. So she did. I had a soft spot for Bernice. She didn't accept Christ, but she accepted me. I laughed at myself and took it as a compliment. I knew I was an odd duck in this place. I felt like a visitor passing through. It was strange, like being caught in an episode of The Twilight Zone. I'll leave it there because I think that's long enough for a short reading, and we'll take it up again tomorrow. All right, bless you heaps. Have a good day. Hope you've enjoyed it so far. Let us know. Oh, and if you want to buy the book, you can do it at my website. I'll put the link in here. And if you've got any comments to make, or if you want to share any of these videos, please go ahead. I'd love to just be some sort of entertainment for people, and maybe they'll be blessed by having a listen to the story. All right. Take care, and I'll see you tomorrow.